Collective. Today is a very special day. We are here at the NGen Trailblazers Conference, located at the Lowenstein-Sandler office in Midtown Manhattan of New York City. Today is special because there is a collection of university entrepreneurs who is present to hear from some of the legends of the VC industry and innovation space. I am sitting right next to one right now, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak with
Geoff Ralston. Thanks for having me, Antonio.
Geoff, it is an absolute pleasure. You were president emeritus of, you are president emeritus, so you were president.
When I'm a president emeritus, that's going to be a sad day for me and my family, but yes, I am president emeritus of Y Combinator.
And Y Combinator, of course, is the thing of dreams for many student entrepreneurs, obviously entrepreneurs generally throughout the world. But for student entrepreneurs especially, I think personally, accelerator programs are something that really allow student entrepreneurs to gain some structure. I did a VC-backed accelerator program myself when I was an undergrad, and I learned a lot from that experience. It was not Y Combinator, but I am curious to just hear more about your perspective generally, about your journey, about running YC, and then we'll get into some specific tips as well.
I started my career as an engineer, and I still consider myself an engineer. I still code. I love coding. I've always loved coding. I've always coded in every job. I was just reflecting that I've actually only been a professional coder for 4 years out of a fairly long career, as it turns out. So my career's had several arcs. I was a coder for a short period of time, and then I became a manager and eventually a tech executive. And I transitioned to being an entrepreneur maybe later than I would have liked, but eventually I started a bunch of companies, and some of those companies worked out. I ended up, one of my companies was purchased by Yahoo, and I spent a long time as an executive at Yahoo, ending up as the chief product officer. And then I kind of shifted gears a bit and started investing more in other founders and in folks who wanted to change the world on their own behalf. And I really loved doing that. I ended up founding my own educational technology accelerator called Imagine K-12. I simultaneously, strangely, I joined Y Combinator and spent 12 years helping founders succeed in any way I knew how at YC. The last about 4 years I was there, I was the president. I ran YC, succeeding Sam Altman, who went on to do other really cool things, yes, as you know, founding OpenAI. And he founded OpenAI, left YC to run OpenAI, and I took over YC, and I ran YC until the end of 2022.
So running YC until the end of 2022, that included the pandemic.
Yeah, like that was really cool. I talked to the founders of YC, two of the founders, Jessica and Paul Graham, Jessica Livingston and Paul Graham, and they sort of persuaded me to take over. And then like a year later, the pandemic happened, which was super complicated. I'm really proud of the way the organization managed through the pandemic, especially because, entrepreneurship is such a hands-on thing,
right? And
that was super complicated. But yeah, it was interesting and hard, and I won't say it was exactly fun, but it was the figuring out how to do it, how to transform YC from a very in-person to a completely remote organization, and to be able to help founders from remote was a fascinating challenge to take on, and I think it worked pretty well for us.
And were there any lessons that you learned because of the difficulties of that time period that have stayed relevant in, generally like your theories of how startups should be run, beyond the pandemic?
Well, I've kind of gone a little back and forth on remote. I think remote is a really powerful idea that probably doesn't work all that great for startups. YC has gone back to almost completely in person, and I think that's largely a really good thing. It helps to be sitting next to someone like this.
Yes, absolutely.
It's powerful for human beings to do all that human stuff and to sense what's going on between us, and to read nonverbal signs, etc. I also learned that in many cases, Zoom calls can work great. And I still do tons of office hours over Zoom, and that's really powerful. So I think you have to learn this balance, and I think that's what, for me, I think the overriding lesson of the pandemic is, whether you're going remote as a business or you're advising startup founders, it's a balance between when you meet in person, when you can do it from remote, and trying to figure out the right, most efficient, most effective way to do whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in your business.
Fascinating. So I guess, pandemic notwithstanding now, you came into this time at Y Combinator after, succeeding Sam Altman, right? Were there any specific things that you think you tried to do that were different from the way that Sam did it? And if you could parlay that too into just like some statements about, what Sam was like at that time, because that is something that this would just be an incredible perspective for our audience and student founders that are constantly utilizing OpenAI products. They probably want to know what Sam was like, many years even prior, but even in the mid-2010s. It was a while ago at this point.
Yeah. Wow. So this is quite a long time ago now. This, from the perspective of 2025, this is stuff happening in 2018 and 2019, so 6 and 7 years ago. Sam was always a big thinker. He goes after things with a belief and confidence that would escape most of us. And I tried to learn from that. Sam had lots and lots of ambitions for YC, for how we would grow and expand and survive for a long time. I took those to heart. I did things a little bit differently. I tried to build structures within YC so that the founder's ambition that Y Combinator would be sort of an educational institution for founders that would last decades or longer could be realized by building structures that helped us survive for a long time. But I also pulled back from some of the things Sam was doing, and you could argue that it was a lack of ambition on my part, or maybe just luck, because, for example, we were starting a joint venture in China, and I pulled back from that, which turned out to be a really good thing, not least of which because the pandemic happened, and that would have been an incredibly difficult thing to manage. But at some point, companies need to stick with their knitting, and that was going to be a divergence for us. Y Combinator, unlike almost any other accelerator, stayed in one place. Stayed focused, and to this day, my successor Gary Tan has really made that central for how he's running YC, and I think that's a good thing.
So to kind of close the loop on YC a bit, build something people want, or make something people want.
That's our motto: build something people want. And by the way, there's a little story behind that.
Oh, please.
I think the audience will like. Many people think build something people want, which Paul Graham invented, came from the idea that, oh, wow, I've built something people want. This is great. And the actual real story is he learned that motto. He created that motto because he built something people didn't want. He saw how painful that was. When you build something people want, it's hard to find success. So he said, okay, from now on, I'm only going to build things people want. And so he built Y Combinator, which people, customers, our founders really do want for good reason.
Certainly. Translating this conversation to some more general advice for the student founders that are listening, there were some thoughts that I've heard that you've had around creating a startup in college. It's complicated, right? It's so complicated. It's oftentimes a question of scope, right? Balancing everything from social life to, your academics, to actually building the company, and especially building the company in the YC way, which is, very customer interview oriented and things like that, trying to build something people want. If you have any opinions on that, I think it would be really helpful for the audience to hear.
I think it's extraordinary to start a company while you're in college. I think it teaches you so much. And what I will say is, it's almost impossible to build a super successful company while you're in college, but you can prepare yourself to build a super successful company while you're in college, whether it's the company you start in college or not.
Right.
It's just such an all-encompassing thing, Antonio. You're doing, everything you can to be successful if you're going to build a successful company. In the end, it leaves very little room for, socializing, like, schoolwork,
Yeah.
anything else that might intrude upon your intense obsession with being successful with your startup. So that's the thing. If you actually do really build a successful startup while you're in college, you're probably not going to finish college. Look at all the examples we have, from Bill Gates to Mark Zuckerberg and so on.
Yep.
None of those folks end up finishing what they're doing. Even like Google, Larry and Sergey, they were in a PhD program. Stop. Closer to home for me at Yahoo. Jerry Yang and David Filo dropped out of the PhD program at Stanford because you just, a startup captures you wholly. Now, to be working on startups and to looking, to meet your co-founders, to be building things and learning what that process is like is fantastic. And if you strike gold, you strike gold, and then that will determine the path your life takes.
Yes. Well, I think in this context too, in the world of thinking about how the path that all of our lives are going to take, I think I must ask you about the future that we currently face with regards to AI. I know that it's a buzzword, right? There are AI boomers, AI doomers. There's people on all different sides of things. You have encountered so many startups in your life. You've seen the development of emerging technologies. AI, despite it having exponential impact, as we all expect, there's a world in which, this is just one of many emerging technologies that we see throughout our entire lifetime. If you could lend your wisdom to the future that you see specifically in the context of AI, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, I'll try to be brief. There have been technological revolutions throughout the course of human history. They're accelerating now, for sure, because there's so many more scientists and technologists working on creating innovation. But AI is different. For the first time, we are creating entities that outperform us in ways that are very special and different. It's not just a tool, Antonio. It's a separate entity that competes with humans on every dimension of cognition, which, if you think about it, it's the one thing, our cognition, our ability to make tools and technology, okay, that and opposable thumbs, but that's why we dominate every ecosystem on this planet and have been able to build technology and understand our place in the universe, at least to a certain extent. That's an extraordinary accomplishment, and we are building beings of a sort, entities that will compete with us on those same grounds, or at least close, at least approaching, and maybe someday surpassing. That's different. That's new, and therefore, I think this is going to be a technological revolution like no other, and perhaps, probably even the most important technological revolution in the history of our species. And I think it will change literally everything.
It's already going to change, I think, fairly immediately, the future of work, right? We think about AI agents, right? I mean, YC in their recent request for startups, right? It's all about AI agents, that and defense tech.
Yeah, the way to think about an AI agent, if I can jump in here, is what we have built with technology historically always was a tool for humans to use to be more effective, more productive, more powerful.
Right.
And that's what ChatGPT, that's what Claude, that's what Llama, that's what Gemini, that's what all the LLMs are. They're a tool that you use to write a better email, or to analyze a presentation, or to write a poem.
Right.
It's just a tool you use. You prompt it, and then it gives you feedback. We are changing, we are evolving from a tool to a colleague. And that's how to think about what an agent is. It's an autonomous colleague who you work with to accomplish a goal. Very different fundamental change from a tool that humans use to accomplish a task.
When you say something like that, it makes sense why the show Severance has rung so true in the lines of the American media
it's art
consumption.
imitating reality or predicting reality. I'm not sure. It's daunting.
Well, certainly it's a calling for founders, right? I mean, I'm sure you agree with this, that we will see very soon the first trillion-dollar company that will probably have less than 20 employees. Or, that's something that, everybody's talking about, is the race to creating, a absolutely massive company. And I think we've seen some growth funds, come out recently. Andreessen Horowitz launching an absolutely massive, mega fund. It feels like people are searching for the next decacorn at least at this stage. I'm interested to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I'll just put it this way: the reason that I believe pretty strongly that the changes in the technology and the advances in the technology are moving at such a pace is because there's such an extraordinary amount of capital being deployed to build these tools,
Right.
to build these technologies, to build these artificial colleagues. And the reason they're deploying that kind of capital is because of the power inherent in doing that. And so I firmly believe that this virtuous cycle, I hope virtuous, of money and capital and expertise will create extraordinarily powerful and great, I should say, an extraordinarily powerful and really great future, flourishing future for humanity. But at the same time, it's daunting because it's going to change literally everything we do.
Fascinating. Let's end by taking it back to Earth for a second.
Okay.
Back to where we are right now. And I appreciate that perspective so much because I think the magnitude of change, we don't feel it in the day-to-day. Or when you're walking around.
It's hard to feel it at all now. You look around ourselves and everything looks the same.
Yep.
I think that will change soon.
I think it will change soon. It'll certainly change in this exact building that we are. I went to law school and I passed the bar. I'm not doing this because I see the future in the way that you see it. And I certainly think that there's, if you're not on this side, that it's just going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult at the very least. Everybody in all kinds of jobs have to figure out how they're going to adjust themselves to this reality.
Yeah, the legal profession is a super interesting place to go when so much of what being an excellent lawyer is understanding the precedents, understanding the law, understanding what's happened in the past. And AI is particularly good at absorbing information and then putting it together in ways that are useful.
Yes. People will certainly have to argue a case. However, even that might be able to be automated too. The NotebookLM tool to listen to a podcast based about anything that you would like it to speak to you about is something that's so fascinating to me. I've been able to learn about the strangest things, the strangest combination of technical things.
I don't know if your audience knows what Google Notebook LLM is, but look it up. It's pretty fascinating. You throw it a bunch of sources and it will create a podcast. It'll create summaries and then a podcast summarizing that. An actual podcast of two entities talking to one another, not humans, that is really easy to digest and summarize, and it's pretty crazy.
Listening to my first NotebookLM podcast was probably my biggest aha moment since the initial time that I used ChatGPT for the first time in 2021.
The progress, we should be clear between us. There's skeptics of how fast this is going to go and whether things are plateauing and whether we'll ever reach, artificial general intelligence, superintelligence. But they tend to be a minority right now because it seems to me that the pace of change and advancement isn't slowing down, isn't stopping. It seems like we're getting closer and closer to some point where the skeptics will have to, I think, eat some crow.
Well, the debate I've seen is that AGI or something that resembles AGI will exist. However, it's not as inherently smart as we think it is, right? It'll be able to dress up its thoughts in an interesting way. It'll be able to create, complex thoughts. It might even be able to have feelings. However, AGI in the end will simply be, based off of a training model and isn't actually thinking for itself. That's kind of the theory that I always see. I'm not really sure what the kind of counter to that is.
Well, here's my counter to it. And it depends, if you're making an argument for whether AGI will actually be conscious or not, I don't know that matters for this argument. If you think about the way an LLM comes up with its thoughts, when you ask it a question, it comes up with a thought and an answer. It has trillions now of parameters to a gigantic polynomial, where the nodes of those polynomials you can think of as being equivalent to neurons. It's a neural network. And based on those parameters, it eventually, and I don't know that I can even describe this articulately, eventually comes up with a thought. It comes up with a series of words that comprise an articulate thought. How much different is that than all of our neurons connecting via synapses with other neurons, and based on the potential and the connections, math, it's all math, right? Ours is chemical math, and it's, silicon math. Is it really that different what they're doing? I don't see that it is. There's arguments. I'm not a neuroscientist, and neuroscientists will argue, that we do more symbolic stuff than they do, and therefore it's different. But there's disagreement even on that. But for me, it all seems like it's kind of the same kind of mystery. All these, down at the cellular level, down at the parameter level, all of these things happen, and thoughts emerge out of that. In both cases, is it that different, Antonio? I don't know.
I honestly don't think so. Our training set is our childhood, our education, our way of life. I guess the only issue that can become some form of difference is to what extent are things innate, right? And I think the concept of, apparently humans don't have any innate thoughts, right? We do not have the same, kind of feeling that a squirrel has, in knowing that, it's going to hibernate and it knows exactly what it's going to eat, right?
But there are things built in. There's clearly things built in. The language instinct is real, right? We're not a blank slate. The tabula rasa idea has been debunked pretty firmly. But I don't know how or what that even means, whether there's the neuronal connections that are made when, as we develop, create something that you can't replicate in an artificial neural network. I don't know. It seems that we maybe need to advance the science of consciousness and brain a little more before we understand that, or maybe it'll just emerge from some advances in the technology of AI that so much money and so many is going after, and so many people are working on.
Absolutely. All right, Geoff. Well, thank you so much
Pleasure.
for your time today. Do you have any final words you'd like to share? Any final pieces of advice?
If I can say one more thing, I'll just say it directly to the camera. I think that given the disruption that's going to happen in the future with this new technology, that entrepreneurship might be the best and safest path for anyone or everyone to follow. Take control of your own destiny. It's always a solid choice in times of change. So good luck.
It's the hero's journey. Take control of your own destiny. Thank you so much, Geoff. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Antonio.